thank you so much for joining us. It's great to have you here with us. All right, I'm going to share video. Sandra's here from Ottawa. Hey, Sandra. So great to see you. Was it last week already? The week before? Anyways, it was great to meet you in person.
I recognize a lot of these names.
Yes. Well, that's the thing about us real estate investors, right? We tend to try very hard to be sponges. So we'll see each other again and again at a multitude of events.
Nova Scotia, we got one East Coaster there.
Oh,
Nova
fantastic.
Scotia.
Love it. All right. So, Cory, can you give me a thumbs up if you see my screen, please? Wonderful.
Well, handsome
All right.
people on there. Good looking people, I might add.
Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for this evening's webinar. We did a super quick pivot and, because we're resilient real estate investors, we went to a plan B. This webinar was originally Richard Canfield and I talking about joint venture partnerships and how infinite banking can help set us apart from other investors. Unfortunately, Richard is quite unwell at the moment, so we're sending him wishes for quick healing and hoping he feels better. And in the meantime, I was able to finagle Cory, who is my partner, in hosting the Real Estate Resilience Summit. And Cory very kindly cleared his schedule and agreed to join us this evening. And instead of our originally scheduled presentation, we're going to do a bit of a deeper dive into joint ventures, but it's going to be an Ask Me Anything. So if you have been wondering about joint venture partnerships, how to structure them, how to know it's time to start using them, all those great questions, Cory and I are going to do our best with our experience working with joint venture partners to answer all of your questions. So thank you for joining us. And Cory, thank you so much for giving up your, well, it's not your evening, but your late afternoon to share your knowledge with everyone. We really appreciate it.
Well, thanks, Elizabeth. I'm always happy to pinch hit, especially for Richard. It must have been a serious bug to take him down. He's a superstar. So I was going to make a joke, but I'm going to hold off on that maybe till the end. But we wish Richard to get well. And in the meantime, we're going to have some fun the next hour. So looking forward to getting going.
Absolutely. So here's my quick disclaimer, basically saying we're here to talk real estate, but we are not accountants or lawyers or other licensed professionals. So when and where needed, we strongly encourage you to consult your power team, make sure that the answers that you receive are going to be the best information and reflective of your personal situation. Before you take action, always do your own research. And that might be including but not limited to talking to others about their experiences, plus your legal and accounting teams, and then make your decision. And just in case anybody has missed out on being on Zoom before, the whole last 3 years didn't happen, we have our quick little, here's how to use Zoom for beginners. So just a reminder, this is a webinar, a Zoom webinar, as opposed to a Zoom meeting. So in the bottom of your screen, you should see a chat box and you should see a Q&A tab. So we will be using the chat box to, if Cory or I make comments or ask questions, this is where you can interact with us and with other people in the webinar. Please make sure you click the drop down. You can see over here that if this is your chat box, you can see the drop down. Make sure that everyone is checked off, because otherwise Cory and I are the only people who see your comments. So unless you want to just speak directly to Cory and I, make sure you click the drop down and it says everyone, and then type your message and share. And if you have questions for us as part of the Ask Me Anything format, please use the Q&A tab, because if you type it in the chat box, there's a good likelihood that it'll get lost somewhere in the conversation. Whereas if you put it in the Q&A, then I can scroll through, look at the questions and kind of group them by topic. That means it's that much more likely that we'll get an opportunity to be able to answer your question and provide you with some of the information that you're looking for. Our agenda this evening, we're going to do the quick welcome and introductions. I'm going to do a brief overview, like a joint ventures in 2 minutes kind of overview, because I want to make sure that we're all approaching this conversation from the same equal footing, that we all understand what we're talking about when we're talking about joint ventures and what it means. And then from there, we're going to dive right into the questions, and then I'll be back at the end of the webinar to do a quick wrap up. So just a reminder, this is one of the last couple of webinars I'm hosting before the multifamily conference, which is in Toronto on May 26th to 28th. So Cory will be choosing a lucky attendee this evening who is going to receive an elite ticket to the multifamily conference in Toronto. So make sure that you're bringing your best questions, and hopefully Cory will call out your number and you'll be the lucky winner. As always, I'm your host, Elizabeth Kelly. I've been a real estate investor for coming up to 20 years now. I am also a coach. My preferred strategies are rent-to-owns and multifamily. And Cory and I have had a lot of good conversations over the last couple of years about multifamily buildings and some of the best parts and some of the most challenging parts. Definitely partners have come up a few times when we've been talking about this. If I can ever help you, if you are stuck or struggling or have questions, by all means, you're going to see a QR code at the end of the webinar. Reach out. I'd love the opportunity to be able to talk you through a challenge and help you plan the next steps in your journey. And we're really fortunate this evening to be joined by my good friend, Cory. Originally, I met Cory because he asked me to be a guest on a summit he was hosting. We then decided that we wanted to host a summit together. So we created the 2022 Real Estate Resilience Summit, which was dedicated to helping investors learn how to be more resilient, learn how to roll with some of the punches, learn how to bounce back in the face of adversity. And goodness knows, 2022 was a tough year for a lot of us as investors. And we're really excited to announce that we will be back again in 2023. We have a really cool lineup of speakers and we're covering some great topics. I'm really excited about what we have coming up for you guys. The summit will be in October again, the 14th and 15th. We've made some changes based on feedback from last year's attendees, and we really hope that we'll be able to see all of you at the summit. Now, Cory is an expert in apartment buildings. He's purchased 10 apartment buildings in the last decade with a value exceeding 25 million. He is an authority on the prairie real estate markets, joint venture partnerships, and raising capital. And Cory also has a course. So for those of you who are interested in learning about multifamily, but you want to do it at sort of a learn at your own pace, Cory's multifamily course, I had the opportunity to take it last year with him, and lots of great information and a ton of value there for sure. It's well worth your time. So here is our joint ventures in 2 minutes. So first, I want to clarify what we're talking about with joint ventures. So a joint venture is a business arrangement in which two or more parties agree to pool their resources for the purpose of purchasing an investment property. So this is what a typical deal structure looks like. So what you sometimes see is someone who qualifies for a mortgage, someone who puts up the down payment, and then someone who is a working partner. Now, if there's two kind of parties in the deal, usually the deal is split 50-50. If there's three people, then usually the mortgage qualifying and the down payment is split 25-25, and the working partner gets 50. Now, the thing to keep in mind is every deal that you create, it has to be worthwhile for all parties involved. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to attract other investors. So there might be some situations where the working partner decides to drop down to 40% because, you know, it might be a significant purchase. There might be a huge purchase price for down payment required. Whatever those particular idiosyncrasies or, you know, unique parts of the deal, everything at the end of the day needs to make sense. Just because things are typically done one way doesn't mean that that is the only way you can do it. You just want to make sure that things make sense and that all parties are being taken care of properly. So when I look at my partnerships, and over the years, I've had upwards of 30 different joint venture partners. Some of them have been for short term, 3 years in a rent to own, and then that's it, we're done. I've had other partners for 15 years. We've owned buildings together for that long. I've been the working partner for 15 years. That's a long time. So essential components that I believe need to be part of every joint venture partnership. The deal structure and the subsequent decisions must be reasonable. If one party is significantly farther ahead, is in a much better position than any of the other parties or all of the other parties, it's not going to be a deal that is going to stand the test of time. If someone feels taken advantage of, or they feel like they're being unfairly used, this is not a partnership that is going to last, and it doesn't feel great to be in it either. All parties must be both accountable and responsive. There is nothing worse than having a joint venture partner who's like, I want to be part of all decision making. You know, if you're going to spend more than $100, I want to know what you're spending it on. And then you email them and you email them and you call them and you text them and you message their wife. And then you keep going and you're just going down the chain of communication going, please respond to me, acknowledge that I exist. And still you don't hear from them. Not ideal in a partnership. Cory, you're looking like you might have had some challenges that way too.
Not that bad. I'll have to hear about that story.
And the last thing is we need to be able to have open and honest communication with them, and we need to have similar goals and values. You know, if you have someone who is all for, you know, buying an apartment building, evicting all the tenants, and, you know, renovating all the units and then filling them all back up again at top dollar, and you have somebody who believes in, you know, providing affordable housing for you know, vulnerable members of the community, if those two people partner up, that's not going to be a partnership that is going to be easy to ride out the challenges. So we definitely want to make sure that we have similar values and that we can have honest communication with them. An ideal joint venture partner should complement your personality and strengths. If you are the working partner, you want to make sure you choose someone who has cash, a good job, and good credit. Because if you partner with someone and neither one of you has cash, a good job, or good credit, you're going to need to bring in a third person. So you want to make sure that your different people, your different prospective partners are actually bringing to the table exactly what you need to add to each individual deal. You want someone who's going to hold you accountable without micromanaging you and trusts you to act in their best interests. So sometimes things happen. Sometimes there's fires, sometimes there's floods, sometimes there's situations. You want to make sure you are partnering with someone who says, no matter what happens, I know that Cory is going to make a decision that is in our best interests. So that if there is this emergency, you can't get a hold of them and a quick decision needs to be made, they trust that you're doing it from a great position. These are the most common joint venture structures that you will probably see. So if you have a joint venture partner, whether they're investing in their personal name or with the corporation, you will either likely see them come in below the holding company, and you might start a company together. So this would be a real estate holding company. This would be sort of the structure you would choose if you intend to do multiple deals with this person or with this company. Option 2 for how you're going to structure the deal is that they come in a specific company that is going to own a specific property or couple of properties, and this would be underneath the real estate holding company. Again, where they come in and how you structure this is going to be very much individual. It's going to be based on what your portfolio looks like, what your experience looks like, what your future vision is. So when you're deciding where you want this partnership to go, you should always talk to your lawyer and your accountant to make sure that it is the most advantageous structure for you. And then the last couple of things we're going to touch on. So there's typically two sort of roles that happen in most partnerships. So there is usually the capital partner or the money partner or whatever you want to call it. This may be, again, one or two parties like we saw in the earlier slide. This is the person or people who qualify for and personally guarantee the mortgage, either in their personal name or as the director of the corporation who's going to be on title. They provide the funds for the down payment and the closing costs. They may also provide renovation funds if that's what you've negotiated. They should assist with decision-making above a certain cost threshold. Typically, in a partnership, you will also have a working partner. This is their responsibility is to assemble a team of professionals to find investment opportunities. They facilitate the closing process, and they solidify the partnership by making sure that a contract is created that is reflective of the conversations between the two parties. It is also the working partner's job to track and reconcile income and expenses, provide the annual tax documents, as well as scheduling and providing regular updates to all partners, and then consulting the partners if investment decisions need to be made. So that's that was a lot of talk before committing. Yes, Teresa, welcome to real estate investing. There's a lot of talking that goes on in here. A glamour shot of Cory. You guys are so fun. I love it. I'm
Yeah, I
so
got a
glad
few
you guys
fans
are
here, I
able
can
to.
tell.
Yeah. This is fantastic, as well as a good memory. Absolutely. And honestly, if you are someone who is challenged with memory, some of the best things that you can do are, meet over Zoom, record it, meet in person, take voice memos, whatever you need to do. But the conversations are really important, and you want to make sure that everything you talk about is reflected in the contract that you are then going to create. Oh, Napal said that was a great overview. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, it was
All
fantastic. Fantastic overview.
Oh, thanks. You guys are so nice. I'm gonna get a fat head. Okay. Let's see. We have a couple of questions already, Cory. Do you want to talk a little bit about kind of your experience and your background with joint ventures?
Yeah, sure. We can do this however you like. We can leave the questions for now. So I just wanted to say a couple things about the slide. Now, I mean, the proportions, the breakdowns that you suggested between, working partner, I would say maybe money partner, the expert, and the person who's signing the guarantees, that can be set up however you want. That's fair to all parties, right? And I think it's important when you're starting out, you might want to make the deal a little bit richer for the money partner to make up kind of for your lack of experience if you're going that route. You want to, have a solid track record. It's probably better to do a deal that's you're not shooting for the moon. You don't want to hit a home run necessarily, but you want to showcase one of your winning deals, but not your best deal if you're trying to, demonstrate a track record. But that could basically be set up however you want. And my experience, the first thing that I was taught actually, and this is, you might have heard this before too, is accountants hate the term joint venture. If you say a word joint venture to an accountant, sometimes they cringe and they're like, that's really referring to like, mergers and acquisitions between like larger companies. What you're doing is more of like a partnership or a co-venture. So I've tried to switch my jargon to co-venture, but everyone knows what joint venture means, right? So it's not like forbidden or anything, but that's just something that I've become aware of over the years. JVs for me started when in 2012. I did my first one, and it was only after I did 2 deals with my own cash. Made some of my own mistakes, not all, unfortunately, and it was within a very small circle, right? So it was my parents, my brother, and a coworker. Those were my first 3 JV partners. And then it branched off from there, and then my relatives got into more deals. The coworkers brought in other coworkers. They brought in family and friends, and eventually the circle got wider and wider until I eventually started raising capital from people I didn't know. But each step you go outside that circle, it gets more complex. You have to dot your I's and cross your T's a lot more carefully, the more you go. I've used really a cookie cutter formula. I think I've done 7 JVs now since 2012. Between 5 to 8 partners. I've kept it very simple. Your corporation document slide, Elizabeth, was bang on with the holdco, and and the working co, and whether people want to invest in their own name personally or with the company. So that was a very good graphical representation, very accurate. I basically used almost one boilerplate USA agreement for my last 6 deals. I had to dramatically change it for the last one because of the structure. And these contracts don't last forever. I mean, you might have had when I say USA agreement, unanimous shareholders agreement, I'm actually talking about the JV agreement. That's the legal agreement that you have. It's evolved over the years. There's a lot of things that have changed, with these deals. So just because you had a template that worked 10 years ago, you may want to switch things up today. But in a nutshell, JVs is a great way to really scale up and buy a lot of property quickly once your own capital is exhausted. Or, if it's just something that you're natural at. And a lot of people do JVs. Some people are terrified. They wouldn't sleep at night with the thought that there's someone else's money out there working. So it's definitely not for everyone, but it is a very powerful tool if used responsibly.
Absolutely. And I think, it's important to highlight that financing is not what it used to be. Like when my husband and I started investing in 2005, we could get 40-year amortizations. We were putting 5% down, and there was no ceiling on the number of mortgages that you could qualify for. As long as the building cash flowed and as long as you had a decent income, then they would just keep giving you more mortgages.
Yeah.
Joint ventures and or co-ventures or whatever we want to call them has really come around and become more and more popular because we're maxing out with our qualifying abilities. As the lending criteria gets tougher, we have to be more creative if we want to continue to grow our portfolios.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean it even in my world, Elizabeth, with multifamily, it's changed a lot with the financing too, because when I did the lion's share of my JV deals, I used conventional financing. So I never had to ask my partners for guarantees. A personal guarantee isn't like one piece of paper. It's a huge invasive probing process for the money partner. Like you're literally doing the mortgage application times how many people are in it. It's not a small thing to ask, right?
Yeah.
And there's indemnifications and there's joint and several guarantees and things like that. We can talk about that a little bit later, but my deals were simple. I didn't have to ask my money partners for guarantees, but now CMHC is really the only game in town who's lending for multifamily. And guess
Yeah.
what? They will not give you a loan without joint and several guarantees. So you have to build that into your JV strategy and into your agreements going forward,
Yeah.
at least for multifamily.
So can you just clarify what that means in terms of like for newer investors, Cory, what does that actually mean, joint and several qualifying?
Oh, yeah, certainly. So in the past, when I signed a personal guarantee, it was just my corporation. So it was basically I qualified for the mortgage on my own based on net worth, because when you qualify for a multifamily, they're looking at net worth and not income. So as long as I had the net worth, I could qualify a loan, which meant we're only going to come after me in the event that, we stop paying the mortgage. But in order for that to happen, the bank would have to suffer a loss. So they would basically I'd have to stop paying. They'd have to take the building over, probably sell it at a loss, and then go after me for that loss. So joint and several means, like, let's say Elizabeth and I are partners and we had two joint venture partners, co-venture partners. That would basically mean that the bank could go after all of us or any of us. It's either joint or several. So it could be each of us individually or all of us equally. Now, chances are what would happen in that scenario is they would go after the biggest fish. They'd go after Elizabeth and they would leave the rest of us alone unless they couldn't get what they wanted from her. But, the bank has the power to enforce that. So that's why you have to build really fair indemnifications into your JV agreement that indemnifies everyone equally. So let's say we all owned a quarter share, there has to be protections in there so that if they go after one person for the guarantees, everyone is on the hook equally. So it's very important to have those kind of things looked at.
Absolutely. And I think it's important for people to know and understand that when you're setting up a corporation, anybody who's a director is going to have to qualify for financing. So if you don't have great credit, great, good cash reserves and an approvable income source, then you really do need to think seriously about whether you are going to be adding to that financing application, and maybe that person stays off the corporation as a director. So Teresa's asking if you have JV templates that you are willing to share. We get into risky territory there, don't we,
Yeah, it
Cory?
depends what you mean by JV templates. I mean, I have sample USA agreements, but you have to join the 6 pillars to see those.
That's fair. The other thing I always worry about too, because I get people who ask me a lot for documents like that. The thing that I always worry about is I'm not comfortable advising someone to do a JV without a lawyer at least looking at the document. So there's a lot of different options out there. I know Rain has some joint venture templates available. Most lawyers, if you talk to them, they'll give you, for $1,000, you can buy their JV template. The thing is, yeah, I mean, you can even join Law Depot and get, lawdepot.ca. You can get, for, I don't know, $100 a year or whatever it is, you can draft basic JV agreements there. The thing that I always worry about is, have I covered all of my bases. And I actually think that's interesting that we're having this conversation, because I just booked 2 lawyers for my webinar at the end of July. So we're going to have Milena Cardinal with Cardinal Law. She's going to come on and talk about, real estate closings and joint venture agreements and all those things. And then I have also booked a litigation lawyer. And she's going to come on and talk about what she sees that's happened and what protections we need to build in to our business systems and processes in order to protect ourselves as best we can from litigation and lawsuit. Because having been through a couple of those, not through my own fault, but just for various reasons, they are super stressful and not very much fun. So it's always best to do your preparation in advance. And personally, I would not sign a JV agreement or a co-venture agreement or a USA unless I had made sure that my lawyer had at least, taken 30 minutes to give it a quick scan and make sure it was going to protect me. Because this is the kind of thing that you don't do it and you need it, but you do it and you never need it. So Teresa
We have
said,
a lot of them in the Q&A. Do you want to start hitting the Q&A, or do you want to like talk a little bit more points?
yeah, no, let's get into the Q&A. Thank you for keeping me on track, because I could literally talk JVs for
Yeah, I
days.
just noticed it's piling up. I don't have my glasses, but it shows 5. So it's like, oh, we better get to these questions. It's Ask Me Anything. So we need to be on the ball here.
Kristen says, always use a lawyer who knows how to do JVs and ensure you understand what you're signing. Them's wise words, Kristen. I'm not even going to ask how you know that. Okay, so starting at the top, Jennifer asked, what are the best practices for communication with a passive money partner in the JV partnership? What types of things do you share or not share? That's an interesting question. Do you want to start with that one, Cory? Or do you want me to
for sure. For sure. There's probably very little that you shouldn't share. I know, when you're doing deals and, oftentimes you'll have conversations with your property manager or whatnot, but you want to make sure you're giving the best and most accurate advice. I mean, I've had scenarios where, I've been prepared to report something to the JV partners and then actually dug down and realized the problem wasn't nearly as bad as I thought it was. So it's important to be accurate, but you want to be as transparent as possible, especially if there's problems. So when you're doing your JV at the start, you're going to all you want to talk about is all the money you're going to, right? That's how the conversation usually goes.
Yeah.
But it's important to talk about, okay, what if the rents drop? What if the market changes? What if there's high vacancies? What if we have turnover? And you have to have contingency plans in that, including how to handle cash calls. So you want to have those conversations before you sign. So the best practices has actually changed for me quite a bit in the age of technology, believe it or not, because I used to do like an email every month at the start of a JV. Then people were getting like, pissed off and saying, that's too many emails. So then I was doing it every quarter. And then, the third year into a deal, it's pretty boring. Then I'm doing it every 6 months, right? But now I'm actually doing it a little differently. I've built data rooms for everything. And this is what you can actually start this with a small property now. Like, they didn't have the tech back when I was starting this. They did, but it was super expensive. But you can set up a data room fairly cheap that you can throw all your property management agreements in there. You can have all of your inspections, all of your relevant documentation that you want them to see. Maybe there's some legal stuff that you don't want them to see. Maybe there's, the stuff with your corporation, maybe your net worth statements. Maybe you don't want your partners to see that. Like you don't want to see theirs, for example, if they have to report that to the lender. But generally best practices is you probably want to email at least once a month off the start. You want to have as much information, available in a data room as you can, because I was just telling Elizabeth leading up to this, I was very fortunate and I was very unfortunate that my JVs before I did this last one were less sophisticated than I was. So a lot of them were very new. They didn't know what to ask. So I didn't really know what to report. But now I have an investor who is a surprise, who's now way more sophisticated than I am. She's actually done limited partnerships. She's been in the game a lot longer than I have and has schooled me a little bit on this, on what she wants to see. So I'm very grateful for that. And it's actually forced me to step it up, several notches to what I was doing before. Not that I was doing anything wrong before. I just wasn't aware of the right way to do it, I could say. That kind of went a little bit long-winded, but I think you get the gist.
Okay, I find it so interesting because so many people in that same situation, Cory, wouldn't have responded the way that you did. They would have taken it as an insult to their ego that somebody, they're the working partner and somebody's telling them how to do things. And I love that your response to that was gratitude for the opportunity to learn, because I think there's a lot of times where we have challenges in real estate, and sometimes if we checked our ego, we wouldn't have those same challenges. Because I would imagine your partner was pretty happy with your response. She may even have visualized that conversation as being a tough one because you would have resisted. But I love that you didn't, and you just took it as an opportunity to learn. That's
But I
amazing.
had to be careful because you don't want to shortchange yourself either. Because there's a lot of I didn't know this person, so there is a lot of sharks out there who will want to they'll want to flip the JV on to make it lopsided in their favor, right? So
Yeah.
you have to watch that as well. So you have to really know the boundaries of what's fair and reasonable. But in this case, the suggestions I had were fantastic, and where there was actually two parties, and when we brought these suggestions to the other party, they weren't even aware of them, and it just solidified the JV and made it gel together even better than it was when we started. So
That's
I was
amazing. And just for clarification, when you talk about a data room, are you talking about like a Dropbox folder?
yeah, exactly. Like some people don't want to read, the general ledger of a 30-page property management statement, right?
Yeah.
Some people might, right?
Yeah.
You don't know who your partner is and how much information they want or how little information they want, right?
Absolutely. And I'm with you, Cory, where I like to err more on the side of transparency. So I don't use a Dropbox folder, but I use software. So we use Buildium to manage our properties. So every piece of data, every piece of information goes into Buildium, and my JV partners have access to it. So they can see who's paid rent this month. They can see, what bills we have, what work orders are in the process, what the utility bill was this month. They can go in real time and take a look at all the income and expenses as my JV partners. And then the flip side of it is anytime I do a JV, there's two people on a bank account, one from my side as the working partner and one from their side as the capital partner. So not only can they go into Buildium and see all the data being tracked, they can go into the bank account and see all the money coming in and going out, so that they can see
Yeah.
the documentation and they can see the money. And that gives them a tremendous sense of comfort. They don't feel like they're being deceived or like there's stuff going on that they don't know. And so, I mean, I don't have anything to hide, so I have no reason not to share what I'm doing. The only
Yeah.
time it becomes
Well said.
challenging was when you get somebody who wants to micromanage you, which was why I said, choose a partner who isn't going to micromanage. We had a partner at one point who wanted to chat every day about what was going on, and it was my husband, and he was the one who chose the partner. I was not a partner I would have chosen, but it was literally like half a dozen units that in another province who was being managed by another property manager. Like the likelihood that we would have an update from one day to the next was non-existent.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, hopefully that takes care of your question, Jennifer, and that provided some good information for you. Okay, next question. Have you ever witnessed a situation where the working partner neglects to maintain the property in good working order or does not comply with bylaw orders? If there are additional costs associated with the neglect, does the JV still share them? I do have something to say about that.
That's a great question. Fabulous
It
question.
is
Go ahead,
because
Elizabeth.
I have seen this situation. So as a property manager in Northern Ontario, more and more over the last few years, people have become interested in buying properties in Northern Ontario. And we had an investor come into town and buy a number of properties. And we could see that things weren't being done because tenants who used to be our tenants, they had their own property manager. So tenants who used to be our tenants would be calling us, and it would be 90 days after closing. And there was no snow removal done. It was literally up to their waist as they're trying to like dig their cars out to get out to work the next day. There was no work being done, no response to after hours emergencies, all those kinds of repairs. If I was a JV partner and I knew of that, I would have been really, really upset, because to me, that means that the working partner has failed to uphold their obligations. So, have I ever witnessed a situation? Yes, I have. It was not a great outcome. If there are additional costs associated with the neglect, does the JV share them? I would say no. I would never, if I failed to do something. I mean, this is the whole premise of errors and omissions insurance that so many people on our power team carry, right? It's not just if I did something I shouldn't have done, it's if I failed to do something I should have done. So in my mind, when someone makes a decision that leads to that kind of damage to a building, to a partnership, they are 100% responsible and on the hook for making that right.
Yeah, I just want to chime into that as well. I mean, this is a situation where, an ounce of prevention is greater than a pound of cure, right? Like if you suspect that your partner may be a shady operator, it's a good idea to check out that operator first. I mean, I've seen a lot of these syndications that say, "Oh, I own all these units and they're in this town and they're wonderful." It's like, okay, great. Well, I want to go see those properties, right? Go out and have a look at them if it's reasonable. Do a video tour if possible with technology now. The guy can
Yeah.
go out there and show you what the units look like. Go there and talk to tenants, get references from other joint venture partners that are in these deals to see what kind of operator this person is. I've seen this happen so many times where people have done that. They've partnered with people with no experience. They're living in, Ontario or BC, and they're investing in Alberta, and they hire some property management company they've never heard of in a bad area. And within 6 months, your building is full of squatters, right? And then the whole thing is about to implode, and the JV partner knows nothing. So, just because you're a silent partner, you shouldn't be silent, especially at the beginning, unless it's a person you've done multiple deals with. I'd say you need to do a walkthrough of the property that you're going to invest money in. I would not invest in any deal if I hadn't actually looked at it myself or touched it to make sure it was real. Now that's just me. That may be not reasonable for a lot of people, but if heaven forbid you find that situation. So let's say you went to a city, and I did this. I invested in a JV in Edmonton. I didn't tell the owner, the managing partner, that I was going. I just went to the property. I pretended I was a renter. I went and looked around the building. I looked around the suites to make sure everything was what I was told. And there was a few abnormalities. It wasn't anything serious, but I addressed them with the managing partner, and we worked through that. But it's important. You want to have a hands-off investment, but you have to, be careful too. But in a situation like this, legal recourse, I mean, if you sign a USA agreement where the operator has control and you don't, you're a silent partner, you don't want to be in that situation. It's not easy to unwind. I mean, there are ways
Yeah.
to get out to sell your shares or to force sale of your shares, but it often involves legal interaction, which you're going to pay a retainer of 5 to 10 grand to do anything. So just don't get in that position. But
Yeah.
if you do, make sure the contract has recourse for you, right?
Yeah, it's definitely one of those situations that an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, right? Where, you need to do your due diligence. You need to be really clear on what your expectations are, what your goals are, what your desires are from your partnership, and who's responsible for what.
Bingo. Yeah, great question.
Perfect. Okay, so next one. Here is the scenario. My contractor now wants to come in as a partner, and he will put out cash as well. We'll be doing the reno. My other partner and I will come up with cash qualifying for the mortgage. Any issues splitting 1/3 each?
You want to go first, Elizabeth, or I guess it's my turn to go first.
No, I mean, you can go ahead. I'm just thinking about whether, I mean, if everybody's comfortable with it, I don't see a major issue with it. The one thing that would come to my mind is I would want to make sure that I've worked enough with the contractor to know that his work is high quality. That would be my biggest concern.
Yeah, I look at the phrasing of the question because I can't see the name with my glasses. I apologize. It looks like Nipal. I probably said that wrong. But the way it's worded at the beginning, my contractor now wants to come in as a partner. So it sounds like this is after the deal's already closed. You have a one-on-one, and now he's trying to add value to a transaction that's already there. Now, it's important to partner with people that have opposing skill sets as you. I mean, if you're not good renovator and you have a renovator that wants to come in, great. Those deals can work well, as long as everybody's on the same page. But fortunately, I've seen a lot of these deals like this go south because people didn't have clear expectations at the beginning. And especially with those what ifs, what if there's a change in environment like we've seen in the last 12 months? What if interest rates have suddenly risen and now we can't flip this property? Now we have to hold it. what are we going to do? Who's going to put in equity if things go south, right? I mean, if you're a really tight group and you know each other well, then you know what you're getting into and you have a track record of experience, which is something else we're going to talk about with JVs. Because right now, the lenders, they're looking at experience more than anything else. You know, they're seeing a lot of these JVs going sideways. I mean, if you have a proven track record of experience, especially over the last 10 years, you're going to get the financing. If you don't, you're going to struggle. Like that's the world we're living in today. But yeah, I mean, I see nothing wrong with this situation as long as it's approached properly and it creates a win-win. You know, I
Yeah.
mean, the contractor's got to add value. He's got to be able to do it cheaper than you can hire if some other contract that you maybe already had. I mean, you don't want to do a deal with someone just to do them a favor. They have to, it has to be mutually beneficial to all parties.
Yeah. I agree with that. And I think you raised a really good point, Cory. I know there's a lot of talk now about doing deals with OPM and other people's money and never putting in your own money. And fundamentally, as a coach, I have and as an investor, I have a challenge with that, because if you go through something like we have been through in the last 12 months and you have none of your own money in the deal, whose money is it that gets lost in a declining market? Who gets hung out to dry when you have to sell a building for less than you have into it? Who's the one? If you're doing deals with only OPM and none of your own money, it's your investors every time who gets burned. And I mean, the short term is, yay, that's not my money. But the long term is, who's going to lend me money? Who's going to continue to lend me money if word gets out that I have burned my investors and lost their money? So
Yeah.
my preference when I'm doing JVs is I don't always want to come in with no money down deals for me. I just want to make sure that it's reflective of the expertise and the value that's being brought from each of the different parties.
Yeah, I think that was a good answer to that question. Hopefully that answered that for you.
Absolutely. All right. Would like to hear about if a relationship sours and you need to exit a JV. Well, let me tell you, there's a lot of that going on lately. In the world of real estate. I can tell you about probably half a dozen people I've talked to in the last 6 months who are having some real challenges with JVs, especially people who've invested in flipping strategies and in the BRRRR strategies, because people aren't able to refinance and pull money out the way that they used to. And for people who've invested in multifamilies, the refinance and give you back your capital that was planned for 3 to 5 years is not happening right now. So there are definitely situations, and sometimes it's not that the relationship sours. I mean, my husband, his one of his first joint venture partners passed away unexpectedly at the age of 36. So he exited the joint venture through no fault of his own. So we were then left dealing with his widow, who, you know, she's now a single mom. She's got 2 kids under the age of 3. She was a stay-at-home mom while he worked, and she was just completely overwhelmed. And I think she was in shock for the first year. Like, how do I raise 2 kids? I have no income, and now my husband's gone. Oh yeah, and there's all these real estate properties floating around, and I don't even have the energy or the bandwidth. So I mean, not all partnerships end in lawsuit. And if you have a good JV agreement, it should lay out, you know, in the event of divorce. So, you know, your shares need to be liquidated because you got to, you know, pay out an X, or, you know, in the event of death, what should happen? In the event of a disagreement, you know, it should go to mediation first. And then if that fails, then this is the prescribed. Everything that might happen or could happen should be outlined in the JV agreement and prescribed for from the very beginning. And I'll be honest, when you have those conversations initially, typically you don't need them at the back end, because in my experience, there are 2 things that take down joint venture agreements. The number 1 flaw is poor communication, and the number 2 is ego. And those are the 2 major contributors that I've seen to JVs falling apart.
Yeah, exactly. And the question, I like the way that specifically this question talks about sour. So maybe the JV relationship didn't sour. We're just going to take the example of it souring, because that's when things can go bad to really bad, you know, and we've alluded to lawsuits. I've been in a couple lawsuits and it's not fun. you want to settle as quickly as you can, even if it means a financial loss. You want to settle and get out of there, no matter what. If it gets to that point, the longer you tie it up, the more stressed out you're going to be. But again, this is the strength of your agreement, right? Generally speaking, if you're going into a JV, there's an understanding that you're married to this thing for probably at least 5 years. I've seen a lot of cases where you don't want to put your last dollars and cents in there. You don't want to be, I'm telling the group a year later, well, I changed my mind. Now I need to get out. Right. I mean, I understand that life events happen, things happen. That's very difficult. And it can put the whole deal in jeopardy. If all of a sudden you got to buy out a partner. And I think James can all use this example when the cake isn't fully baked, right? Like your value's still down. Well, yeah, well, if you want out, then you have to expect to get bought out maybe 50 cents on the dollar. Maybe that's all you're going to get. So you have to be prepared. You have to ask yourself do I want out of this that bad? Is it that sour that I'm willing to take a loss? Because under the first right of refusal clause, on most JV agreements, you can sell your shares, but you have to sell them to the people within the group first. And then only then you can sell it to the outside third party, but it has to be at the price that you offer to your other partners. So you can't, offer your partners, 100% of the value, then try to fire sale it outside of the group. So if you really want out, you have to offer an amount that that the inside partners are going to buy it on if you need to get out. But then that depends on what's happened inside the JV, and this again goes back to due diligence, because a lot of times, when these things start to sour, and you haven't, especially if you haven't done your homework on the syndicator, when a simple Google search could reveal that there's outstanding litigation against this person or this party, it's pretty easy to find that out to do a search. Then it's really not a very comfortable spot to be in.
Absolutely, Cory. I couldn't agree more. And, I saw Mark had a comment, only the lawyers end up winning in a lawsuit. Absolutely. And it's funny because some of the lawsuits we've been involved in have been tenants suing us for slip and falls. And there's a whole breed of lawyer out there whose literal goal is just to take advantage of people who don't know any better, and they show up, maybe they found them in the hospital or, in the fracture clinic or whatever it was, and they go, oh, what happened to you? Oh, you fell in your apartment? That's terrible. You know what? We can sue. We can get you some money and you'll never have to work again. And I've been through
Better call Saul.
No offense to the legitimate lawyers out there, but like there's a couple of them here in Ontario, and you see the same names over and over again. Ambulance chasers, you got it, Peter. And the crazy thing is they don't tell people. And you try not to laugh because that would be unkind. But literally the last one I saw like this, I talked to my tenant afterwards, after the insurance companies and the dust had settled and everything. So they sued us for, Brad called that one. They sued us for $1 million for a slip and fall. Guy was wasted. He insisted on putting carpets around all over outside of his apartment, down the stairs, all kinds of stuff, because whatever reason. Completely wasted, fell down the stairs, broke his arm. The lawyer told him that he was going to get him $1 million. So we got the lawsuit, $1 million. The insurance company, of course, steps in, sorts it all out, blah, blah, blah. The guy's awarded $25,000 because not a legitimate claim at all. That's basically just a disappear, go away. I'm not going to spend any more time on you. So he gets $25,000. Guess how much the lawyers took of that $25,000? 24,800. He got $200. So I shouldn't laugh. It's not nice. Nobody wants.
We gotta hit back. We gotta get back to the questions. They're starting to pile up again. Sorry to cut in.
Okay. All right. Back to the questions. Thank goodness I have you, Cory. Clearly,
it's all good. I think we got that latest one.
Okay. So all right. So we answered that one. So if I'm starting out, is it better I set up a holding company in my name and then do a holding company one-on-one with your JV? Audrey, I'm just going to tell you, I think I speak for Cory and I both. That is a question for your lawyer and your accountant, because answering that question is completely dependent on your personal situation. What assets you currently have in your personal name, whether, you have a spouse who also has assets, what kind of assets your partner is coming in with. what kind of structure, what kind of deal you're doing, how long, what are your long-term goals in real estate. There are literally a million different factors. So you definitely want to talk to, and I know a lot of times when you talk to a lawyer, they'll say one thing. When you talk to an accountant, they'll say something different. My favorite strategy is to put them both in the room at the same time and make them hash it out in front of me in less than an hour. And when I do that, I get answers to my questions, much better ones than what do you think I should do? Because the accountant's going to say don't incorporate, the lawyer's going to say incorporate, and then you're left going, I don't know whose opinion should win in this particular scenario.
Yeah, I can tell you though, I can tell you me for commercial, when it comes to guarantees, you have to do corporation, right? So,
Yeah.
you know, that's kind of I'll just say what I did. You know, I did a hold co, actually did a couple. So I did a hold co, and then every JV deal that I do, it's a separate company where just my hold co owns a certain part of the shares, and then along with the other partners. And then we just have a different company for every building.
Gotcha. Okay, perfect. All right. So Colin says, great info, guys. A bit off topic, but would you recommend multifamily or multi-unit to novice investors, people with less than a year experience?
Absolutely. As long as you got if you have the capital, especially if you don't have a regular job, like maybe you can't qualify for an income. I mean, I did a mortgage application for a condo in Kelowna, and they basically laughed at me. But I have $10 million in buildings under contract here that I'm probably going to be buying, and the bank won't even bat an eye to lend me the money. So it's really funny how that dynamic works out. But I mean, if you have the deal flow, if you have access to a deal, you have access to capital, and you want to do it off the start, I would say do commercial sooner rather than later. You know, everybody who owns multifamily that I know pretty much says the same thing. I wish we'd have done it sooner. You know, Amanda Boland, my friend Amanda in Saskatoon, her first rental property was a 12-suite apartment. So it's not for everybody, but it definitely can be done. I mean, knowing what I had now, if I could go back to the year 2000, that's what I would have done. But that was a long time ago.
I think the important thing to note is I don't think it matters so much, whether you've been a real estate investor for, 5 years or 5 minutes. I think the important thing is the education and the knowledge piece, because I feel like there's a lot of mistakes that are very common for first-time investors or new investors to make. And I feel like, taking a course, working with a coach, these types of things are going to prevent you from making mistakes, from making common mistakes, from making the same mistakes that other people have made. So if you are interested in multifamily, then I recommend spend the next 3 months to 6 months being a sponge, listening to podcasts, attending webinars like this, talking to people, finding a good power team to surround you and to catch you if you encounter issues or challenges. But the knowledge should come first before looking for deals and properties. And if you're one of those people who gets really excited and just wants to start putting offers in, and you don't have that team around you to support you and to catch you when you make a decision that maybe you would want to think twice about, you want to make sure you have people who know what they're doing, who are going to support you in that. Okay, so Teresa is super keen and loving everything you're saying, Cory. All the rest of our questions are Teresa. So if anybody has any questions for us, get them in.
Keep in mind, there's multifamily tickets for the winner. So get those questions flowing, folks. Come on, chop, chop.
Well, at this point, I think Teresa kind of takes the cake for the questions, but I'm pretty sure she's out on the West with you. So I don't know.
It's not too late. Some people can still get in. There's been some great questions.
Absolutely. So. Okay. All right. So Teresa said, is a JV easier if the JV is husband and wife instead of just one of the spouses? I'm thinking about death or divorce, or does it make a difference?
Is the JV easier if JV is husband and wife instead of just one of the spouses?
I think it's different because you're looking at family law as opposed to like contract law. So there are some different rules, case law, and those kinds of things that govern it. This would be a great question, Teresa. Come to my webinar at the end of July with the lawyers and ask them, because I kind of suspect that there is more clarity because like a commercial lease is like the Wild West. There's no Residential Tenancy Act, there's no landlord tenant board that kind of oversees things. Family law is a lot more like that, whereas a joint venture agreement is a little bit more like a commercial lease in that there's case law, but it really depends. The outcome of a situation is very dependent on the contract that you have in place.
I'm not sure if Teresa, maybe you can clarify a little bit what it sounds like JV between husband and wife. Do you mean like if you have a hold co, is the hold co your hold co and then you're doing JVs with other people? Or if you and your husband jointly own the hold co and then you're raising JV capital? I'm not sure if that's what you meant. But
Okay, so we'll give Teresa a minute to digest that. Sandra said, how would you divide the shares if you are the money and hands-on property manager and your JV partner is only doing the labor for your construction? I think my first question is, why is that your partner? Why is that? Why are you not just paying them for services? So Sandra, if you can, does that make sense for you too, Cory?
yeah, this sounds like it's kind of like the renovator type of question where they're bringing in, one partner. I would assume this is for like maybe a smaller deal, like a fix, flip, or a house or something, a buy and hold. If your partner, like if it's a renovation project, right? And if you just have one partner who's doing the renovations.
Yeah.
And I think what she's asking is how would you determine the proportion, right? So,
I
but
honestly,
again, yeah,
I probably wouldn't bring on someone just for the renovation. I mean, I can hire a project manager and not give up equity in the property. This is a thing that I think a lot of people do, especially newer investors. So
yeah.
having done dozens of JVs, I know how time consuming it is to have partners. And if I can figure out a way to do the deal myself, I would probably do that before I would give up equity, because I give up equity and I'm giving up my decision making. I'm giving up my time because I need to manage them. Sometimes I'm giving up my freedom in terms of being able to just make quick decisions and take action. So I know a lot of people view JV partnerships as the be all and end all when it comes to investing in real estate. And they definitely have, the right time and the right place. But if I can do a deal on my own, I'm probably going to do that before I'm going to go out to JVs.
Yeah, and no knock against contractors, but a lot of them they're used to just getting paid for money, right? So they're not really accustomed to how the JV deals work. And they may see their work as being either undervalued, right? When they go to do it, they may be like, okay, well, I put my sweat equity into this and you're just sitting behind a computer. So, you know, they could feel like that happened to me with one deal. I'm just using it as an example and not suggesting that would happen. I know people have partnered with renovators successfully, but like Elizabeth, my property management has their own team of renovators. So I would never, specifically partner with with those types of individuals on those deals, but not saying that it wouldn't work, right?
Absolutely. Kristen has a great question. She said, limited partnership to JV. What's the difference and when do you use one over the other?
This is a great question because I just talked to Sam Lee, one of my students, and he's doing an LP. And I was like, what the heck? It's just like, he's one of my students. He's only been doing multifamily for a year. Now he's doing an LP on a 36 suiter. So, him and I had a good rap about this, kind of where do you draw it? Because, to do an LP, you're looking at limited partnership, which is an LPGP structure. You're looking at anywhere from like 20 to 40 grand, potentially more to set up that structure, versus a standard unanimous shareholders agreement, basic JV template, which could run you $1,000 for a corporation, $1,000 for a USA agreement. Now, the question also came up here. I saw, people investing personally versus corporation, and I can touch on that in a minute here, but that's a great question. So basically, Sam's take on it was any more than 5 partners or any more than, I think, $3 million in deal or any more than a 30 suiter or something like that. Now, I've gone bigger than that just with a normal JV. I'm thinking more like 50 suiter and you're raising, up to 2 million in capital or more. Now, raising $1.5 million in a simple structure like this is okay if you have 3 $500,000 investors. But if you don't have that, right? If you have like, 10 or 15 investors for smaller amounts, that gets really, really hairy, right? And you want to have the LP GP structure. But it really depends on what your long-term goals are. Like it's way easier to do a simple corporation per deal. But as the deals get larger and more complex, you really are forced to go into that LP model. And for the most part, for me, the big change, as I said at the beginning, is guarantees. Like I could easily do a USA agreement, where I had 10 partners, and I have, but they didn't have to sign the guarantee. Well, now to do that and get them to sign a USA that maybe their lawyers have to modify and tweak, and to do that on 10 sets of lawyers and people, no way. Like you need an LP structure. Here's the package. This is what it is. Or are you in, kind of thing, right? So
Mhm.
that is a moving target. 2 or 3 years ago, where do you go from simple corp to LP is dramatically different than it is today. Which is good and bad. I mean, there's a lot of people. The good news is there's a lot of people doing the LPs. The bad news is there's a lot of people doing LPs. So it's really hard to tell the good ones. But if people are doing LPs, you still want to make sure they have a track record, right? They've done at least 10 years. They've done at least 3 deals from start to finish. Hopefully they've done it in different market cycles. They haven't been in like, a boom town where just the market has only gone up, right? So that's a great lawyer question. That Graham Barr, I think you might have had him on. He specializes in that. But again, that could be you ask 3 different lawyers, you get 3 different questions. So yeah.
And it's interesting that you mentioned Graham Barr because I haven't had him on my webinar because we have him coming for Summit. And
Right.
this is actually, Sam, I love your question. How do you showcase your deals? Is it only on social media? So as a coach, I cringe when I see people advertising deals on social media because the securities commissions and the various provinces, they are now watching. They are joining Facebook groups. They are watching what people are saying. I know
Sorry.
three investors last year who were investigated by the Ontario Securities Commissions. So posting your deals on social media is a direct violation in most cases of the securities code and will end up with, best case scenario, your hand being slapped, worst case scenario, fines. So I don't ever recommend that you advertise your deals on social media. And quite honestly, if I have a deal that I'm posting on social media, it means that my pool of potential joint venture partners is not deep enough. And I needed to spend more time cultivating my relationships before I focused on finding a deal. Because I don't ever want to be in a situation where I'm partnering up with a stranger. We're talking about all these pieces here that you need to find that need to be present in this partnership. And if you're partnering with a literal stranger that you just met on Facebook for the first time, an hour ago, what's the likelihood that this is going to be a great partnership and it's going to last for the next, 5, 10, 15 years, the lifespan of this deal? So my recommendation is before you are actively out there looking for deals, you should be deepening your pool of potential partners and people to work with.
Yeah, well said. I mean, start having those conversations early and often. I mean, use Facebook to have friends, but have it going somewhere. I mean, have it linked to a call, do a one-on-one Zoom call with people. Just start to have these conversations, feel people out. You might talk to them for 5 or 10 years before they ever put money with you. But if you've had these conversations consistently, then then you're going to have pick of the litter when it comes to the capital. I mean, I've advertised webinars talking about a specific deal, but I haven't openly said I'm raising money for this deal. At least I hope I haven't. But what Elizabeth says is you have to really be careful now because they're watching like pretty much everywhere now.
Yeah, they are. And that was why we wanted to make a point when we chose speakers for the summit. We want people to know what are the right things and what are the wrong things to do. So if that's something that you are thinking about doing, then I encourage you, please, right now, summit ticket is $49 for 2 days with 12 experts. So it's an absolute steal if it prevents you from doing something that you shouldn't be doing and you end up, getting your hand slapped or a fine. We don't want that to happen to anybody.
No, and I
Okay.
posted the link to the summit at the beginning, so if you want to scroll up, it's there. Sorry, I stole the thunder for a second there.
Hey, Kristen says the summit is well worth it. Thanks, Kristen. Okay. So we got a couple more good questions here. So
Yeah,
Kamlesh says, what are the 5 most important things that you would include in a JV agreement? Love this question.
yeah, fabulous. I mean, I can just name a few. You want, ooh. So you want to have your roles clearly defined, your directors, your roles and responsibilities. You want to have indemnification, how you're gonna protect each other. You want to have your clauses for early exit, which is right of first refusal, right? So if you want to get out, you have to offer the shares to your partner first. You need a share for disposition. What if someone gets divorced, you go bankrupt, your shares are seized? There has to be a mechanism in there to maybe give them, you know, it has to be in there somehow. You want a shotgun clause. If it's a one-on-one JV, this doesn't get talked about often enough. Like if Elizabeth and I were in a partnership together and we absolutely hated each other's guts, there's got to be a way to shotgun each other. And for those that don't know what that is, imagine a piece of pie. Okay, you cut a piece of pie into 2 slices. The fair way is when you were kids, you'd ask one kid would cut it the piece in half, and then and then the other party gets to choose which piece to take. So then it's fair. If I'm cutting a piece down the middle and I'm letting the other person choose, then it's completely fair. And that's what the shotgun clause is. So if we absolutely wanted out of this deal, I'm going to offer Elizabeth the money to buy out the company, to buy out her shares. So she has 2 choices in 30 days. She can buy out my shares for what I offered, or she has to accept my offer to buy her shares. But one way or another, the deal dies, right? So it's important to have a shotgun clause in there because I've seen a lot of these deals, the partners just fight, it goes to arbitration, it's nasty. You want a way to divorce immediately. I think having the divorce clauses in there are more important than anything else, although the roles and everything are critical. I think that's 4. I mean, you can have a drag along clause too, so that if someone wants to sell all the shares, they have to drag you along and give you benefits. You can have clauses in there like what happened in Edmonton, the market just went bananas, right? Prices went through the roof. And, a couple partners didn't want to sell and everybody else wanted to sell. And they couldn't sell because of those partners. And then the market crashed, right? So you want to have an exit mechanism. If the property appreciates by 30%, you want to be able to have the right to ask for an appraisal and get out early. You want to have those protections in there. I could probably list 50 things, but I don't think we have 3 hours. So those are the ones that come to mind. Elizabeth, you probably have a few more you want to add. I'm sure I missed a bunch.
No, honestly, that was pretty comprehensive, and you went a lot deeper than I was going to go. So that was a fantastic answer, Cory. I like that.
Well, thank you.
Once in a while, you just show up and knock my socks off. I tell you.
You haven't told me to shut up yet, but we still got some questions flooding in. They really want those multifamily tickets.
I know, right? Okay, so we answered this question. All right, I'm just looking through. So Brad's asking, what's the reason you can't list your deal on social media? Because technically it violates the Securities Commission because you're advertising or offering returns. Basically, the only people who can legally do that are mortgage brokers are allowed to trade in securities, and certified financial planners are allowed to trade in securities. Those are the only 2 classes of individuals who are licensed to do so. So when you go online and you're advertising, hey, you know what, projected returns of 20%, you're believed to be trading in securities, and that violates the Securities Commission laws.
Yeah,
That
you got to
answer?
be very, very careful about that. So read up on the securities laws in your province.
Yeah.
And also don't on your website, do not put ROI. Like don't put return on investment because then basically if you promise someone a return, the securities company can hold your feet in the fire and force you to pay that out, whether the deal did that ROI or not. So read up on the site. I'm just going to post a link for the BC one so you guys can have a look. The provinces are all fairly similar, but take a read. They have a whole section on there about different ways of raising capital. Yeah, I cannot say guaranteed. Okay, yeah, thank you for that, Peter. Yeah, I had heard, and I imagine that they're getting more and more strict as we go. Like you say, they're all over Facebook. Yeah,
Yep.
you're asking for trouble.
Absolutely. Aaron has a question. With mortgages becoming harder to get and cap rates continuing to drop, are there any suggestions to get a deal to work from a DCR perspective?
Yeah, that's a great question, and this is where like MLI Select comes in. If we're talking about multifamily, I know debt coverage ratio it applies for single family as well, based on your income. But I'm assuming this is a multifamily question because you're asking about cap rates. But it's funny because this select program has now used the debt coverage ratio of 1.1 instead of 1.3. So just to go back a little bit, what that is it's the cushion between your net income, the difference between your income and your expenses divided by your mortgage payments. So usually the bank wants to see a cushion of about 30%, usually 1.3. For this MLI Select program, they've really narrowed it to 1.1, giving you enough rope to hang yourself essentially, right? So your cash flow is like super tight. But DCR is now the number one criteria that lenders look for. I just had a conversation with my mortgage broker yesterday about this. So he said DSCR, interest rate, and amortization, those are all the primary considerations. Cap rate is now a secondary consideration on a multifamily or commercial deal. It's all about the debt coverage, especially with the rise in interest rates and your amortization. And that's the metric that you have to master going forward. And with the property so expensive and expenses going up like crazy, it's getting tougher and tougher to make deals work. Elizabeth and I have talked about, the $100 per suite cash flow buffer when buying a multi is almost impossible today, right?
Yeah. I'll be honest, I think in your with your location in the West Coast and your knowledge in Alberta, I think you're extremely well positioned to do multifamilies. It's been months since I've seen a multifamily deal in Ontario where the numbers are actually worth looking at.
Wow. Yeah, it's a completely different strategy. I see people doing it. I'm not sure how they're doing it or how they're even qualifying for the loans, to be honest.
I think there's a lot of people banking on future valuations, which is one way to do it. But there's a real conception out there that multifamily is a cash flow strategy. And with the prices that we're paying now, multifamily is not a cash flow play anymore. It's a long-term wealth building. You're hoping to refinance and take capital out every 3 to 5 years. Hopefully you still cash flow when you take that capital out. Now, that being said, with MLI Select and financing at 95%, you're not going to be refinancing in 3 years and pulling equity out. There's not going to be anything there yet.
Well, and hopefully you don't have to pay the loan down, like a lot of people are finding out when their term runs out.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. So multifamily, when you have the knowledge and you've chosen the right market, then it can be great. But I think that it feels to me like people have an obsession with multifamily right now. And there's a lot of people feeling like they're getting left behind if they're not doing multifamily and they're not in multifamily and they're not loving multifamily. And if you are one of those people who's feeling that, I just want to let you know it's okay.
That's a great statement. I'm obviously biased towards multifamily because I've done very well, but I have a lot of connections. I've been doing this for 20 years. All the deals that I'm getting now are all best pocket listings that the public is not seeing. So it takes a long time to get to that point. And I appreciate that and understand that, but I still see people buying multifamily, their first try. Like I had a guy join my program a few weeks ago. We wrote an offer together on a 50 suiter. And he just narrowly missed out on getting the deal. So,
Wow.
It can happen, but I totally hear what you're saying. It's one of those buzzwords that, especially you see it on social media. You see, it says like multi automatically means it's going to do well or something. It can, but it's like there's a lot more tragedies and success stories, unfortunately.
Yeah, I had a joint venture partner. He was a police officer, and he came to me and he said, I want to do 3 rent to owns a year for 3 years. That's going to give me a good chunk of money. And when I retire from the police force, I'm going to become a flipper. I was like, okay. So we did that. We did 3 rent to owns a year for 3 years. So he did a total of 9 rent to owns. And when he finished, I think he ended up with about $700,000. And he used that money to start a flipping company. And now he's happily flipping away in Southern Ontario, happy as can be. So
there you go.
It's important not to assume that there is only one way to achieve your goals. And if something doesn't feel right to you, if it doesn't feel like a fit, if you are forcing it, then maybe it's time to reevaluate some alternative ways to achieve your goals. And there's nothing wrong.
And there are a lot of them, and that's what we're going to talk. That's what the summit is all about, folks. Yeah.
Yeah. So Teresa has a ton of questions here, Cory. I feel like you and Teresa maybe need like a one-on-one.
I haven't been reading them, but I can maybe tackle one or two of them if we have time. How are we doing for time?
We're probably okay. If anybody else wants to throw a question in, we'll weave Teresa's questions in, and we'll give it a couple more minutes and then we'll wrap up for this evening.
Yeah, I'll just sort of talk about between company and individual. So generally, if I was going to invest, like now I would invest with a company because I have a holdco, but most of my early JV partners, like my parents, my brother, these people, they didn't have corporations. So I mean, they just invested in their personal names. It's nice and clean, it's easy. I've seen a lot of people that just buy apartment buildings in their names too. In fact, the deal I just closed on, the vendor is actually in the person's primary name. That's not unusual to see that, especially for people that are older. Now, I mean, I wouldn't automatically incorporate. I mean, I made the mistake incorporating for a single family, not realizing that, wow, it's like costs you $1,000 to incorporate. It costs you $2,000 every year to get the accountant to do your return, another like $300 to do an annual return. So those costs really add up. And if you don't have a deal that's large enough, that often, doesn't make sense in the
Mhm.
potential tax savings or, whatever benefits that you thought you were going to get from it. So I would incorporate later rather than sooner. And, having going back, I would only do it if I was forced to now. I mean, I would probably try to do a lot more, without it. Um, Keep in mind now with CMHC, the deal that I just had, that my two JV partners, they both invested in corporations. And before that, I didn't have anybody on my JV partner. I had about 50 JV partners. Not a single one of them invested with the company. So it's a whole different dynamic um, on that. And in single family, it's probably the same way, Elizabeth. Like I'm sure you're not incorporating if someone just wants to do like a flip or something, or maybe a rent to own, unless you're doing a bunch of them, or you have a company that you're doing it in bulk or something.
Yeah, and a lot of it depends. I mean, the choice about a corporation, as a real estate investor, I really look at it from a liability perspective. So if I don't
Yeah,
have significant personal assets, I don't need a corporation to protect them. And if I'm choosing an investment strategy that doesn't have a tremendous amount of risk associated with it, then I might not need to from that perspective either. So I may decide or my partner may decide to invest in their personal name. I have to be honest though, I'm always more comfortable with a corporation because it just offers that layer of separation. The other thing it enables me to do
yeah,
is have multiple partners without everything going into like a big melting pot. So, me as a
yeah,
person, as the working partner, I would never invest in my personal name because then my personal assets gets mixed in. My car, my house, my cottage, all that gets added to the pot if there's ever a lawsuit between myself or my partner. But also all the different partners that I have all get added to the pot as well, and it just makes things too complicated. I'm willing to spend a little bit more to have that separation and clarity, but again, this is a question for your accountant and your lawyer together in a room.
yeah. No, that's a great way. That's a great way to put it. And I see Peter just added there, protection always top of mind. Yeah, so
Yeah,
it's good to have good agreements and have corporations. So
yeah.
Teresa asked a very common question: the size of the building determine the maximum number of JVs, or I guess the size of the deal. I mean, in my experience, I would not work with more than five on one deal, right? Five partners, especially if you have spouses involved. It just gets too hairy. Then the odds that you're going to have a major event, like you're going to have a divorce, or you're going to have one of the partners go bankrupt, one of the partners pass away, the likelihood, increases exponentially the more partners you have, right? And if you have a deal that has 10 people and you're in it for 10 years, there is stuff you're going to have to deal with. Um, you have to do part of the thing with the loan too is, well, sorry, the incorporation is your partners. You have to have a shareholder meeting every year. If you don't have a shareholder meeting, you have to have a resolution in lieu of shareholder meeting. So you have to hound your partners to sign documents every year. So I mean, if you're doing that with 20 people every year, they might do it for the first year, but you're always chasing people for signatures, and it becomes really cumbersome. And I know in LP there is as well, because you have to track everybody's addresses. There's a lot to track as well. You have to be super organized. But going back now, if I was going any more than 5 or 6 partners, it would be the LP route today, simply for the fact that the partners have to sign guarantees otherwise in a corporation because of CMHC. So I'm essentially forced to do an LP today if I'm doing a larger deal.
Yeah. And the other thing to keep in mind too is that recently the rules around syndication have changed.
Yeah.
So like we did a multifamily deal where we did it all private money to close. And I think we had 12 or 14 different partners as lenders. It was a big syndication. You can't do that kind of stuff anymore. I think the most you're allowed is 4. So it sometimes it's the financing and the way that it's structured. Sometimes it's what the different parties or partners bring in terms of what's needed in the deal. So there can be a variety of factors that determine that. Okay,
Are there any
so
markets where multifamily cash flows? Oh, sorry.
no, I was just gonna say, Teresa and Brad kind of asked similar questions. So can you answer that in 30 seconds or less? And then we will do Rhonda's quickly and then we'll wrap up with Helga.
Okay, sounds good. You have a rent to own question. Yeah. So is there any markets where multifamily cash flows? Alberta, baby. Alberta and Saskatchewan. Alberta is the last affordable city left. The CMHC median rent for MLI Select is $1,633. No rents in Alberta or even anywhere close to that, except for maybe in Calgary. So Edmonton, Saskatoon, my 2 favorite cities that cash flow. There's tons of buildings that cash flow right now that probably might only last a year. So a little insider advice there.
Perfect. Love it. Rhonda asked, with rent to own, can the liabilities be on the tenant buyer? Example, slip and fall. They can be, Rhonda. The times when it wouldn't be on the tenant buyer is if they are the ones who slipped and fell. It'll still come back. With rent to owns, your tenant buyer is still going to be signing an Ontario standard lease or a standard lease of whatever province is available. So whatever the liabilities are incumbent on a landlord with a tenant relationship, those liabilities would still be in place in the rent to own scenario. And Helga said, any advice for someone who has never done a JV? Helga, I would say jump on the phone, book a call, talk to as many people as possible who have done JVs before, talk to them about what works and what doesn't work, what pitfalls they've encountered, and make sure you have a great lawyer, book some time with them and have a chat with them about, what they recommend. There's some fantastic books out there. There's some great podcasts and resources available. Be a sponge, absorb as much information as you can. And when you think you're ready for the first one, then have a chat with somebody. And it never hurts to have a coach or a mentor or somebody on your power team who has done them before and can provide words of advice and encouragement for you.
Well said.
Amazing. Everyone, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been such a pleasure. If you missed any part of this or joined late or had to, well, you won't be here if you had to leave early, but if you did, then you should have the recording of this in your inbox by Friday at the latest. And if you have missed this parts of this webinar or any others, I'm just going to do a quick screen share here with you. But I do have all of my previous webinars from the last 3 or 4 years are all on my YouTube channel. So somebody, Teresa, I think you asked about do a webinar with a lawyer or an accountant. So about 2.5 or 3 years ago, one of the first webinars I did was, should I incorporate? I had a lawyer, I had an accountant, I had a mortgage broker, and I had an insurance broker on, because I'm like, that is it. I want the definitive answer. What the heck am I doing? So
that
they
sounds
all
like a
got
start to a really good joke.
You know what they all did? They all got on and went, that depends, which is the most common answer for everything in real estate. So the short answer is that depends whether you should incorporate or not, but definitely best to talk with your power team here. I am going to flip over. I left my slides somewhere. Here we go. All right, Cory, I don't think this is going to be any big shocker to anybody, but who do you want to award the elite ticket to the multifamily conference to?
Well, I mean, if I don't say Teresa, she's going to hunt me down and kill me. So Teresa, congratulations. Some fantastic questions. I love the engagement. If you do this on the gamification on the summit, you're going to win the prize. And we're going to have some really great prizes this year.
That's awesome. Thank you so much today, Cory. I appreciate you coming in. I know that we wish Richard all the best for a quick recovery, but it has been such an absolute pleasure to have you on to talk about JVs today.
Thank you. I had a pleasure too. It was a blast.
Awesome. So if you're new to my real estate investing community, please go ahead, subscribe to my YouTube channel. As I said, last 3 years worth of videos, all the content and information is free. And of course, now that you have registered for this webinar, stay tuned. You will get invitations. I host between 2 and 3 webinars a month, generally based on questions that people have asked me, whether it's in my Facebook group or whether it's sending me messages on social media or even my coaching clients. My goal is always to find high quality experts to bring you some great content and information, absolutely free. If you would like to get in touch with either one of us, this is our contact information. If you would like, Cory, are you still doing discovery calls so people can learn more about your 6 pillars multifamily course?
Yeah, I sure can. Yeah, if you go to www.sixpillarsmultifamily.com, I forgot to tell you, there's a link on there to set up a free call with me. And yeah, we can chat about anything you want. I'm happy to talk. And then I also have my new podcast is multifamilynakedtruth.com.
Love it. And have you put that picture up with you naked holding a sign that says multifamily naked truth? Is that your go-to logo now?
I can't find a photographer who's willing to take that. So it might be a while.
Love it. All right. And my next webinar is going to be with the one, the only Seth Ferguson, the host of the Multifamily Conference. So it's going to be Monday, May 8th, 7:00 p.m. And just to keep going with a theme here, we're going to be talking about the 3 T's of underwriting a multifamily building. Thank you so much to each and every one of you for attending. I absolutely love the interaction and engagement. It has been fantastic to see all of you
That was
out.
wonderful. A lot of questions.
Absolutely. Hopefully everyone enjoyed this as much as we did, and I'll look forward to seeing you guys again in just a couple of weeks. All the best, guys. Take care.